Welcome to the Healthier Tech Podcast, the show about building a healthier relationship with modern technology. Now here are your hosts, R. Blank and Stephanie Warner.
In today's episode, we explore the vital role of human connection in today's increasingly digital world. Our guest, Pete Bombaci, is a human connection expert and the founder of the GenWell Project. With his team, they have been on a mission since 2016 to educate, empower, and catalyze people around the importance of human connection for our health, happiness, longevity, and the benefit of society as a whole. While we've been all taught about healthy eating, exercise, and avoiding smoking, we often overlook the significance of human connection in our well-being. In this episode, we'll dive deep into the science, stories, and strategies behind building meaningful connections in a disconnected world. Welcome to the Healthier Tech Podcast, Pete.
Welcome, Pete.
Honestly, it's so great to be here with you guys. Thank you so much for inviting me along.
No, I'm really glad that we were able to make this human connection, even if it's intermediated by Zoom. So just to give our listeners a little bit of context for the questions that'll come right after, what is the GenWell Project?
Well, the GenWell Project is a human connection movement, and our mission is to make the world a happier and healthier place by educating, empowering, and catalyzing people around the importance of face-to-face, proactive human connection as an action that we can all take for our health, our happiness, our longevity, and the betterment of society. And we do that, educate through daily social posts, which we've been doing for 6 years on our platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, trying to help educate people on why they should be more conscious and intentional around their social health. We go out and do workplace, community, and classroom programming where we go in and, again, educate people and then give them tips, tools, and ideas on how they can make it happen. And then more broadly, we do things like this, which is an opportunity to bring conversations to the broader population to say, hey, as you started off, look, we've known about exercise and eating well. We know about 8 glasses of water, sleeping, smoking cessation. But now the research shows it's more important to stay socially connected than it is to exercise, and is a greater indicator of our health than smoking, obesity, and high blood pressure. But we've never told anybody.
Wow, that's really amazing. And, I can't wait to dig into some of this, but what inspired you to start this mission?
It's a great question, Stephanie. And I'll tell you, it flashed back to 2003. There was a blackout on the eastern seaboard of North America. 50 million people went without power from 2 to 7 days. And I always talk about, when I do a lot of work in the workplaces, I always say, the title of my presentation is, Human Connection Beyond the Crisis. On that day, people came, together. It was actually the greatest crisis that we could have ever had, because really what happened was the power was turned off, which meant all the distractions that we face every day were turned off, that forced us to sit quietly for a minute. And it happened at 4 o'clock, so people had to get home, and certainly that was a challenge for people with mobility issues, seniors, lots of different people. So getting home was a challenge. But once we got home, we sat quietly, and then eventually people, suggested, like, well, what am I going to do? The TV doesn't work, my phone doesn't work, the computer doesn't work, the radio doesn't work. And I think we struggle to sit in our own silence these days. I think that's something that's pretty common. And so what did we do is we walked out of our homes and out of our offices and out of wherever we were, and we connected with people. And so at 9 o'clock at night, I was at a friend's house. I'd gone over, he was having a barbecue. It was 31 degrees out. And I stood on the front porch, and the street was packed with people. And I thought to myself, oh my God, this is the type of street that I've always wanted to live on, one where everybody on the street knows each other. So I walked out onto the street, and I said to the people, because they were riding bicycles and eating hot dogs and drinks and throwing a football. And I said, oh my God, this is amazing. You guys all know each other. And everybody paused and looked at me and went, we don't. and so it was right there at that moment, Stephanie, where I went, oh my gosh, look at this. It took a crisis for us to come out of our homes and out of our cubicles to talk to the person in the office beside us. I know people in downtown Toronto, I'm up here in Canada, who went down to the basement of the building that they'd been in, 50 stories, and spent the next 8 to 10 hours drinking with people they'd never met before, that on a normal day they'd walk by in the hallway or in the elevator and not even pay attention to. But when we gave them permission and an opportunity, they enjoyed every minute of it. Because when we connect with somebody today that we didn't know yesterday, they could be a friend tomorrow. They could teach us something. They could make us laugh. They could, so many benefits that come from human connection. But most of us pre-pandemic weren't making time for it. And now I'd suggest on the other side of the global pandemic, it's becoming more of a challenge for most of us to make it a part of our everyday life. So that's what we're trying to address.
So I want to get back to the role of the pandemic in your work. But you touched on something that I also saw on your website. Social connection is a greater determinant to health than obesity, smoking, and high blood pressure. Now, on your website, you're citing work out of the University of Michigan. I'm wondering, what your understanding of the research is demonstrating the relative importance of human connection to our health versus some of these other unhealthy habits and toxins that we are all much more familiar with.
Well, I think it is, if I understand that question properly, I think that the challenge we have in trying to get people to understand this is that behavior change starts with knowledge. So we have all the research there. But by the way, this research, starting with John Cacioppo in the 90s, this research has been in existence for some time. But pre-pandemic, most of us didn't think consciously about our social connections because they happened so naturally. There's a study out of England, Julian Sandstrom, that over 60% of the people that we saw pre-pandemic were not people that we intended to see that day. They were casual collisions. It was because you went to the office and you met at the coffee machine or the lunchroom or on the walk to the office in the parking lot or at the grocery store, or all those places that we went. And so we were unconsciously building social connection into our lives. And then the pandemic came along. And frankly, what it ripped out of our lives were all those fun moments of connection that fill us up. And what were we left with? Work Zoom meetings. And even the social meetings that we normally would have had, because you and I would have ran into each other in a coffee shop. How you doing? What's, great to see you. It's Stephanie. What's going on? Well, every social interaction required a Zoom link and a meeting in the calendar. And so we are not used to having to plan our social interactions. So we have a long way to go to take this information that's been available for 40 years that everybody was ignoring because it used to just happen as part of the course of our days, to actually get people up to speed to go, oh my gosh, what you really mean is I need to consciously and intentionally build human relations with all different types of people. Knowing your neighbor, our research shows those who know their neighbor and spend 1 to 4 hours a week speaking to their neighbor have a 3 times less sense of loneliness. When we talk to strangers, those who talk to strangers are 3 times happier than those who don't talk to strangers once a week. Family and friends, added value for increased happiness, reduced loneliness. Workplace colleagues have a greater positive impact on our happiness and reduced sense of loneliness than connections with our family and friends. And so some people may question that and go, how could that be that my colleagues have a greater impact on me than my family and friends? Well, let's remember, not everybody has a family. Not everybody has a supportive family. Some people, friends could be all over the world. And so we may not get that time. But when we work in an organization, those connections that are trying to get us through our day, we go through the ups and downs of work. We spend 8 to 10 hours, if not longer, doing it or thinking about it. You start to realize, wow, if I actually have some positive, fulfilling relationships in the workplace with my colleagues, that's going to increase my productivity or my efficiency, which helps me finish my day earlier. Less mistakes, greater trust, greater loyalty, happiness, well-being. So many benefits. But as we come out of the global pandemic, we're addressing things we've never had to think of before. Hey, do you want to go to the office or not? And I think some people, the natural inclination is, well, what do I ever need to go to the office for? Well, let me tell you some reasons why I think you should.
So, one thing, and you touched on a lot there that
Sorry,
I'd like no, that's good. That wasn't a complaint. Just saying that I'd like to get back to. But one thing you said was talking about the number of, I think you used the word collisions or
casual collisions.
Casual collisions. And it reminded me, once I saw Tony Hsieh, who was the founder of Zappos and the CEO. And he also, a lot of people outside Las Vegas may not know this, he was the mind behind something called the Downtown Project in Las Vegas, because Las Vegas was not known for having a good it's known for the Strip, but not having a real downtown. And he engineered this whole project where he built this, he was planning retail, he was planning educational, he was planning, dining and all of these things. And I once heard him talk about it. And one of the things that he said was a design principle of the Downtown Project was maximizing the number of these unplanned collisions in a day, and that there was some way of measuring the activity of an economy based on how many unplanned collisions you could actually generate with the layout of a city and of a space where people spend time. You're nodding like the kind of what the work that I'm referencing.
Well, I think, place-based, human connection, certainly building spaces that allow people to come together is something that lots of people are focusing on right now. Is it parks? Is it dog parks? How do we get people to connect? But I will say that is a complement to the concept of educating people on the why connecting is important. And I think there's a huge opportunity here, and I'm even going to throw it out there. There has to be a dog provider, a dog food company who wants to get involved in this movement, because we have a crisis of dog owners out there right now. And that crisis is we only know how to talk to dogs, not to the other owner. So, and
I've had that experience.
Yeah, there's a great clip on YouTube of two humans walking their dogs and the two dogs talking about their humans.
Yeah.
Not talking very positively about. It's like, hey, how come those two people don't talk? How come they talk to me but they don't talk to each other? And it's so funny. It's true. And that's what's so powerful about it is, we struggle to connect with each other even when we are standing right beside each other.
And it so feels like, we went through, at least in North America, we went through over a century of urban and suburban development without this being a design principle.
Well said.
Okay. So before we move on, and there are some more questions that we want to ask, can you give our listeners an idea, like, to say a lack of social connection is harmful to your health? That's one thing, but what are some of the negative health outcomes that science is demonstrating as a result from this?
Yeah. So, increase of heart disease, by over 30%. I think that's stroke and heart attack, 29 and 32. Early onset dementia, doubles your risk of diabetes after the age of 50. Increase in anxiety and depression, can also impact obesity, addiction, increased risk of suicide. So I think what's really interesting in that list, and there might be a couple that I'm missing, but those are the major ones, is I think a lot of people look at this and say, oh, this is a mental health issue, right? And the reality is, no, it's not just a mental health issue. It's a physical health issue as well. Because really what the stress and anxiety that comes from from having a sense of loneliness or chronic loneliness is inflammation in the body. And inflammation in the body leads to all types of illnesses, including cancer. And so when we don't feel a sense of connection and belonging, when we don't feel that sense of, I should be here, I belong here, I feel like I'm part of this team, this community, this workplace, that can lead to, social isolation, disconnection, and loneliness. And the longer term impacts of that can be devastating to our health.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It makes me think, I just have to share a little story because it really makes me think of my grandmother. She is 91 now, and she still is of good health. She lives by herself, and she spends a lot of time crocheting and by herself. And I spend a lot of time with her. And I recently went on a little trip, and I'm still on it. And I was speaking to her the other day, and she was talking about how she just wasn't feeling very good. She just wasn't, really wasn't feeling good. She felt like she was in a bad mood. And then a friend came over and just chatted with her for about a half an hour. And she said, I was just in such a great mood after. We didn't talk about anything specific. I just felt so much better. And I had this just deep realization of the how critical it really is to have some sort of touch point with other people, and that it can really affect your mental well-being. And I really hadn't thought about the physical part of that as well. So thank you for talking about that and touching on that.
Stephanie, I think your story to me is, the starting point is we all start usually with seniors in this conversation, because we naturally think, okay, well, and I had my mom pass, but she was 89, and I thought I was being a good son, seeing her once a week. And now I recognize wasn't good enough. And whether I saw her or else I arranged for other people to see her, we need to do more for our seniors. And it's not just about educating seniors on how they could be more socially active. It's awakening the broader society to say, hey, if that next door neighbor is a senior and Stephanie can't see her mom because Stephanie lives in another town or another country, then maybe you could step in by just going and checking in on Stephanie's mom and just saying hello when she walks out of the house every day. And so this is the collective consciousness that I think can inspire us all to recognize we are all part of the solution to the challenge. And it's no one person's issue, and it shouldn't be a medical solution. We shouldn't wait till people are sick before we try to help them, which tends to be the way we, address
that's getting into just our fundamental approach to health, which is
totally are. So what we're trying to do is say, hey, let's educate everybody so we can all be part of that solution.
So you, Stephanie's anecdote and your reply feeds right into actually my next question, right? Because it's not just the pandemic and remote work and life priority and all the craziness of the last few years that's impacting this. I've also read for a long time that it's increasingly difficult, especially I think for men, to make these types of connections as we age. And so that the older you are, the harder it is to actually, for lack of a better term, make friends. What does the science say about that? And how do you go about kind of remedying that side of the demographic?
It's so funny. I've heard the research that says, men have a tough time building relationships. Our research here suggests that women report being lonelier than men do. And so, unfortunately, I think the biggest challenge in this conversation is to broad stroke any gender, any age. Our research shows that it's over 50% of every demographic that feels lonely and isolated on a regular basis. And let's recognize loneliness is a human innate need, or the need to connect is. And so loneliness is no different than thirst or hunger. So we all can feel thirsty or hungry, but we know what to do. I go to the fridge, I get a drink. I go to the fridge, I get something to eat. And loneliness, it's okay. I go through a bad day. I, break up with a loved one or have a fight. Then I should just know that, I feel lonely. I call up a friend, or I go have a coffee and connect with somebody. And this is how we need to start getting people to think. So, sorry, R, and I lost the other part of that question was...
Oh, well, it was, no, I mean, I think you actually addressed it, which is different articles or different studies will say, different demographics, different genders will react differently. But your point being, this is a universal problem. It doesn't matter really what demographic you're talking about. We're talking about a serious problem in all demographics.
And even from a gender lens, and that was the other part that I wanted to touch on, which is, what? Men with the structures that we have created in society over the last, 100 years, and the roles that we're supposed to play, tough He-Man, I can get through anything. I can't be empathetic. I can't show emotion. No wonder men may struggle a little more at times. Some men, I should say, not all men, can struggle to build connection. And on the other flip side of it, women are supposed to be so great at building human connection. They're so empathetic and compassionate, yet 90% of new moms, as an example, feel lonely and isolated on a regular basis. So different stage of life, different genders, different scenarios, every one of us can feel it. And that's what I think is so powerful about building a movement, is when we finally all recognize, oh my God, this is all of us. Oh, okay. So then I shouldn't create stigma, or I shouldn't make you feel bad about feeling lonely today because, stuff went down at work today that it didn't go the way you wanted. What I should say is, hey, let's go grab a coffee, man. Let's go shoot the breeze, and, let's come out the other side of it. And I hope you're feeling better, because I sat down and I actively listened, and I said, hey, so tell me what happened today, because I'm sorry you're feeling that way. And that's the education that I think we're trying to bring to people, to recognize, hey, make the time, actively seek out the people in your lives that you care about, and say, hey, Steph, how's everything going? You want to go for a coffee? Let's go for a walk. Let's go for a hike. Tell me what's been going on in your life lately. Because if we can all think about one more person a day that we could reach out to for our own well-being or theirs, I think we can change the world.
Yeah, I love that. And I had a different question, but now I kind of want to ask, why do you think it's so challenging to reach out and to actively listen? I think that's there's a key phrase you said. Why is that so challenging?
I'm sorry, what did you say, Steph?
Exactly.
Yeah, Steph, I think it all goes back to the same thing, which is we've never educated people on this. We go to school to learn reading, writing, math, science, calculus, algebra, all those other subjects that many of us question during the course of our schooling years. Will I ever actually use calculus? And I still to this day don't know if I actually ever did use calculus. Maybe I did, I'm not sure. But these are life skills. And we left that to the family, we left that maybe to the church, we maybe left that to those who were a little more conscious than other people. But as we go through, and our generation, and I look at the three of us and I go, well, we've never been through a war, certainly a war that's in our vicinity. We've lived through a pretty good life. And so I know Tony Robbins, says something like, good times create weak people create bad times create strong people. And, if you look at the last 60 years, what have we done? And, Robert Putnam's book, Bowling Alone, highlights that ultimately what we've done this all to ourselves. We've slowly disconnected from one another. We've built bigger houses for smaller families, taller backyard fences, back decks instead of front porches, in-home movie theaters, automatic garage doors. We have created the isolation that we are now waking up to on the other side of the global pandemic. And why did we do it? I believe, Stephanie, because nobody told us how important social connection was for our happiness, health, our longevity, our well-being, and maybe even, and more importantly, certainly in the US right now with many mass shootings. And the research shows there's no correlation to mental health. It's correlation to loneliness. Because when we feel disconnected from other people, we lash out to blame somebody, to, it's your fault for making me feel this way. So we can think about it from, the health and well-being of people. We can think about it from a societal level, workplaces. We can think about it from classrooms. And the reality is this impacts all of us.
Yeah, that was a really powerful statement. And I kind of want to pull on a thread that you said way back in the beginning, which, it seems like we've been talking for quite a while because we've touched on so many really great points. But the thread I want to pull on is you said something about talking to strangers. And going back to what you just said too, we've been taught not to talk to strangers from the time that we're children. And there's a very valid reason for children not to talk to strangers. But as adults, we don't talk about how do you talk to strangers? How do you create those opportunities without fear to be just genuinely friendly and curious about somebody else who's around you that you don't know?
Oh, Stephanie, I'm so glad you asked this question, because I think this is the gap that many of us can fill in our life, that gap of human connection, that sense of belonging in our communities, on our streets, in our workplaces. What we need to understand is we've been telling people to not talk to strangers for over 50 years. Stranger danger, don't talk to strangers, and the media certainly highlights when a child is abducted or something doesn't go well. Let's be clear, I'll bet you that child didn't talk to the abductor anyway. So that's not even really what we're talking about here. What we're really talking about is, I'm not saying talk to people in a dark alley at 2:00 in the morning.
That's good. That's
when
good.
you're
Solid.
alone. I'm talking about the people that you walk by every day on the street in front of your home. I'm talking about the people that you walk by from the parking lot at the grocery store to go into the grocery store. I'm talking about the server at the coffee shop. I'm talking about, there's a million places where you don't put yourself at any risk. And all I'm asking you to do, and let's be clear, I don't mean you have to have a long conversation. A lot of introverts tell me that talking to strangers could be a great entry for them to feel like they're connected without having to get into a long conversation. I'm talking about eye contact. I'm talking about a smile. I'm talking about a hello. How are you? How's your day? If you want, turn that into a 15 or 30-minute conversation because you find something to connect on. But I'm not telling you, but the research shows even a smile to a stranger can have a positive impact on them and you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Oh, continue. Sorry.
No, so we are missing these little opportunities that are all around us every day to build a greater sense of connection and belonging, which may be part of the solution to the disconnected world we find ourselves in today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to add just one more. So in my experience, I travel around a lot and I'm always taking photos of birds. And what I found is just having this, like having a thing that I'm doing and I'm observing, people start coming around and asking, like, what is that camera? What are you taking pictures of? And I always smiling because I'm doing this thing that I love. And it's welcoming. And I've kind of learned that talking to strangers is really good because I get to have these conversations that I wouldn't get to have otherwise. And I wonder if you have any strategies for people who want to be a little bit more open, or perhaps want to be a little more open to having a connection with somebody they don't know. Maybe they feel a little uncomfortable or unsure and don't want to come off as weird. Do you have any strategies for people who want to start engaging a little bit more?
Yeah, there's a researcher out of the UK named Dr. Gillian Sandstrom. We did an interview a couple months back, and when we were asked that question, there was a simple one, which is just try it. When it comes to talking to strangers, over 90% of the time when we talk to strangers, it ends up in a positive experience for both people. That's the research. So, here we are being told not to talk to strangers. We know that those who talk to strangers are 3 times happier than those that don't talk to strangers. And over 90% of the time, it ends up in a positive experience for both people. If you still tell people not to talk to strangers, or you think it's a bad idea, I'm telling you, you are creating more grief for yourself because you're not taking advantage of this thing is here. But let's talk about just human connection on a more broad perspective. So first off, let's all start talking about it, because you now have more information in this podcast than most people do about the importance of human connection to their health and well-being. Number 2, when we put it into our calendar, it becomes official. It's just the reality of the world that we live in today. So if you do want to make human connection a part of your life, put it in your calendar. Because whether it's on this 30-minute period, I'm going to reach out to one friend a week, or I'm going to call some old colleagues, or whatever you're going to do, put it in the calendar. Number 3, try and make things recurring. So when you go bird watching, Stephanie, you probably do it same time every week. I play hockey a couple times a week, so I know I'm going to see 20 guys twice a week, and then we get to go out and have a coffee or a beer afterwards, and that social time is regular. I don't need to think about it. But then on top of that, I can find those spontaneous ones where I run into R on the street and I'm like, hey, R, you want to go have a beer? Or you want to go get connected? Whatever. So volunteering is another great opportunity. You know, when we do volunteer work, it gives us a sense of purpose, which I think is really powerful and something that I think a lot of people looked for during the pandemic. But when you work with other volunteers, it's a great opportunity to connect with other people that are empathetic and compassionate. They wouldn't be doing volunteer work if they didn't understand that. And so there's an easy in to doing good and building human connection with people who are probably the most kind people you can find, because they've already put their hand up to say, I want to help make the world a better place, you know, through my efforts. And so there's a few ideas on how we can all start building healthier connection habits into our each and every day.
So you mentioned you and me going for a beer, which I would love to do at some point when we're in the same vicinity. But I've heard you in another interview, right? Because, you know, when you're talking about building up the courage to talk to strangers, alcohol is very well known to be quite good at that. But in this other interview, you were talking about how a lot of social interactions are built around alcohol consumption. So, you know, after work, you go out for happy hour or, you know, things like that. What are your thoughts on the role of alcohol in not the work that you're doing, but in this kind of realm of helping to establish social connection versus encouraging alcohol consumption versus excluding people who may not want to participate in alcohol consumption?
Yeah, I think it's a really great conversation. I spent 20 years in the alcohol business, so I come at this with a particular lens. And we even came out with guidelines in Canada recently that changed our guidelines up until a couple of months ago, where it was 2 drinks a day were said to be good for your heart, good for, you know, different aspects of health. The new guidelines are now saying 2 drinks a week. And that was a proposed set of guidelines to the Canadian government. And there was a backlash from people that are in the social space, understanding that, you know, if you require a drink in order to get out and actually be social, if that helps you get over your social anxiety, the research would suggest that it's better for you to have that drink and get out and build social connections into your life. So as with everything in life, it's about balance. And so alcohol, no different than social connection, you know, because the person, you know, who spends 24 hours a day socializing, that person's not going to be in a great space either if they don't find time to do other things in their life, like sleep and, you know, and connecting with oneself. And Stephanie, I love your birding example, because that to me is about following a passion. You know, we all spend far too much time at work. What do we do to fill us up with the things that make us, as you said, I smile when people come and talk to me about birding. And so, you know, to me, this is the holistic, I'm a Maslow's hierarchy fan. And so if I go through the hierarchies and how I, you know, interpret it, mental and physical health, social health, financial health, and, you know, contribution to something beyond ourselves, passions, which is what you were talking about with birding, and then purpose. And that's a very, you know, alterated version of Maslow's hierarchy. But any one of those levels of the hierarchy, if it's ignored for too long, will provide a gap. And what Maslow always said is that whatever level you are on the hierarchy, if you ignore that level, you will eventually crash to that level of the hierarchy. So when we know that mental and physical health is the foundation, social health is the, you know, the third pillar in that bucket of, you know, how do we stay holistically healthy? And then we build on top of those things. This is the type of life skill that I think if we educated people on, we'd all be much more prepared to address the challenges of a global pandemic, a job loss, a divorce, you know, whatever challenge we may face in our lives.
So I like that you mentioned balance. That's obviously, well, maybe not to you, but to our listeners, a running theme throughout the Healthier Tech podcast, also through our work at Shield Your Body. And so going back to that sort of that perspective of finding balance, right? We I think it's obvious to people the role that technology has played in disintermediating relationships, What do you think are some ways that our listeners can think about fostering healthier habits by using technology? How can technology help foster human connection?
Great question. And I don't want to challenge you, but I would, when you say that everybody understands the role that is played in disconnecting us, you know, if that was the case, I think more of us would actually be taking steps to solve.
You're right. I'm sorry. I meant everybody who's listening to this show.
Yeah, yeah.
you're totally fair call out. But I do think there's a growing, I mean, it's part of the premise of this show. There's a growing realization in a way, like throughout my entire life, tech was viewed as, and we've talked about this in multiple episodes at greater length, so I don't need to give the full spiel here.
Yeah.
Throughout my whole life, every advancement in technology was basically viewed as a good thing.
Yeah.
And if you could get something, a new tech device that did X, you wanted to go out and do X, and it would make your life better. And I feel like, especially since the pandemic, we've seen a real shift. And so that is why we've seen the Facebook whistleblower testify before Congress. We've seen that Facebook has had their own internal research talking about suicidal ideation among teen girls. We've seen Facebook have some quarters where they've actually lost users. We've seen Netflix have some quarters where they've actually lost subscribers. That kind of stuff has never happened. And I do feel like it might not be everybody, which is a fair point, but definitely a growing awareness that not everything that's tech is good, which is very much in contrast to the first 4 decades of my life, where it really was a different bias, a different assumption. If you could get something tech, it'll improve your happiness, it'll improve your productivity, it'll do all. And now we're starting to, I think, increasingly realize that that's not always true.
Thank you for, I knew what you meant, but I wanted to call it out.
You got me on my soapbox.
Dude, that was amazing, because I couldn't agree with you more. When technology advances kept happening, and it was, oh my God, look at this, we'll be able to do this and that. But nobody understood the unintended consequences. And we all just assumed that we'd embrace the good, forget the bad, and we'd go on and live these incredible lives. And I think we're now waking up. Nobody saw many of the social platforms that we're, spending too much time on now. People never would have, nobody could have understood the idea of the attention economy, that so I watch your platform and you make money. And, if I spend more time, you make even more money. And so, we are still awakening to this. But, as we talked about even before we got on here, and I think this was your point, which is, look at this conversation that we're having right now. Technology is an incredible thing. The GenWell Project, even as a human connection movement that wants you to spend more time face to face, is not anti-technology, because sometimes technology is a massive supplement to the human interactions that make us happy and healthy. Whether it's because we got a busy life and so Stephanie and I can't make time to see each other face to face today, or we're in a different country and we're related, or old friends, or whatever the case may be. There's so many ways in which digital technology can supplement the human interactions that we need. But we need to be conscious that doom scrolling and, the morning scroll and the nighttime scroll and and this is coming from a guy who's extremely conscious of it, and I still get caught in it.
Yeah, I love that you use the word and emphasize the word supplement, because it's really, in this case, it is such it's the perfect word to use. And I think one of the key things that we are starting to collectively talk about is this economy of attention, of stickiness, of technology. Some of the more treacherous technology is really geared towards and built to take your time and to get you to stay in and then not have that human connection. So I think that's I just wanted to point out that I like that you use the word supplement, and I think that the economy there is something that we definitely need to be talking about more.
Yeah, and I use the Dr. Phil phrase when I say, for 15 years we've told people, and as I listen to you, maybe it's 20 years now. For 20 years we've told people to put down the technology. And as Dr. Phil would say, how is that working for you? Nothing's changing. We're spending more time. There's more mental health issues. We're more disconnected from one another. So I have a suggestion. Rather than focusing on the problem and saying, don't look at the purple elephant over there in the corner of the room, why don't we focus people's attention on what the solution is and recognize that we are all part of it, which is when you know somebody, and my wife and I do this all the time, I will see her and she's very conscious as well. But when I see her, going through her 27th minute of watching Instagram reels that are very positive and very motivational, and there's some beautiful, like Gary Vaynerchuk, Tony Robbins, Jay Shetty, like these are all really inspiring people. The reality is there's enough inspiration that you can go back to go and do something that's going to change your life, because we can all get distracted at times, and we are all here to help each other. That when I see you doing what I know you don't want to do, and that could be us to a kid, that could be us to a neighbor, that could be us to a family member, that could be us to, I'm a big believer. We created a WhatsApp group on our street during the global pandemic so that all the parents could reach out and say, hey, Jimmy's going out to this park to play. Can anybody else send their kids out at the same time? This is a different world than what I grew up. There was always 10 kids on the street when I grew up. Today, there's no kids on the street unless somebody takes and makes an effort. And so it may cause a little more time in our lives. It may need more effort. But at the end of the day, we have to be in this for each other. And we have to be part of the solution together, because that's the only way we make the world a happier and healthier place for everybody.
Well, Pete, this has been a really motivating and interesting conversation. I know Stephanie agrees.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where, in terms of getting people to be part of the movement and to learn more about you and connect with GenWell Project and your work, where would you like our listeners to connect with you in the project?
Yeah, thank you, R. And thank you, Stephanie. First off, I want to say thank you to you guys for giving us the opportunity to share the message, share the conversation. This is how we awaken the broader society to just how important social connection is. The GenWell Project is on, most of the social platforms, and they can tune in. And I don't even want you to tune into us too often either. But at genwellproject.org is our website. All the social platforms at GenWell Project. I think one of them's at the GenWell Project. YouTube, we have a ton of content that people can go listen to experts talking about the importance of human connection. And twice a year, and one's coming up May 5th, 6th, 7th, we do GenWell weekends when we're trying to catalyze people around human connection. Make us the excuse. If you haven't called up an old friend, or you haven't reached out to a neighbor, it's springtime. Suicide rates are highest in the springtime. It's not wintertime. And so what a great time of the year for each of us to reach out to somebody and say, hey, Stephanie, we haven't gotten together in a while. Why don't we get together for a barbecue or go for a coffee or whatever the case may be? We want to help make it easier for people to get connected. So if people are interested in finding out more about that, they can head over to our website and find out more about GenWell weekends as well.
Excellent. So we'll include the links to all of those in the show notes. Again, Pete, thank you so much. This is, you're the first, we've touched on a lot of these themes individually in different shows, but you're the first guest we've had who's been able to tie it up together the way that you have. And I really appreciate meeting you and you taking the time to share this information with our audience.
Feelings are mutual, guys.
Yeah, no, this has been wonderful. And I think what you're doing is critical. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing. And I appreciate you spearheading this.
That means the world to me, guys. Honestly, it's been an interesting journey for 6.5 years, because until the pandemic, most people thought I was crazy and what are you talking about social connection? But now we're on the other side of the pandemic, and conversation like this not only filled my bucket, I hope they filled your bucket, and I hope that many of your listeners will feel motivated and inspired to step outside and go and talk to somebody today, whether it's a stranger saying hello to the barista at the coffee shop, maybe building a relationship with their neighbor, spending time with a colleague that you haven't been going in the office to see. The opportunity to build connection is everywhere, and we all can start today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Healthier Tech Podcast. Remember to check the show notes for all the links and resources mentioned in the show. Please like and subscribe to the Healthier Tech Podcast on Apple, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice. Get your free quick start guide to building a healthier relationship with technology and our latest information at healthiertech.co.